Once again, welcome back live in Tallahassee, Florida. The eyes of the nation certainly watching the city today to find the official recount in the state of Florida out of 6 million votes cast. And for anyone who thought this presidential race was a tad boring at times, well, it is anything but today. The surrogates have flown in here from the Gore camp and the Bush camp. With us now is Bill DALEY, the campaign chairman for Al Gore, and we say good morning to you. There are voting irregularities reported throughout the state. What are we to make of what we're hearing in Palm Beach County, officially from the Gore campaign? Is there a suggestion here that there was fraud involved in this election?
Well, there's obvious evidence of confusion when you have 19,000 people whose ballots were discarded and who wanted to participate in the system. This vote is now down to 900 or less spread between Governor Bush and the Vice President, but with 19,000 ballots in one county being discarded by virtue of obvious confusion, it raises a serious question.
But when you give the fact that state law requires both the Democratic officials and Republican officials to go ahead and approve that ballot before it goes through voters, where's the argument?
Well, the arguments obviously will be made in court. I'm not a Florida law expert, election law expert. We are meeting with lawyers. We're looking at the law, the supporters who are concerned as to whether or not a true count of the expression of the people of Florida has been made at this point.
Given that confusion, though, those votes, the 19,000 votes, have been thrown out. Many argue that's the equitable thing to do when there's a point of confusion. Would you accept that?
Yeah, but the confusion was caused by virtue of the layout of the ballot.
Indeed, but what else
that is, well, I think the legal system will determine whether there are options. But we have to remember, over 100 million Americans participated in a system which is the heart of our democracy, and to allow one county by virtue of what may be a violation of the Florida law, at least obviously some confusion that has caused over 19,000 people's votes to be discarded, would be a rather terrible situation for one to accept the presidency.
As you know, there are lawsuits pending, at least 2 that we're aware of in the southeastern part of the state. The lawyers representing those plaintiffs figure there should be a revote. A redo, essentially, in this race. Would you support that?
We're right now meeting later on this morning, Secretary Christopher and I, with lawyers to look at what options there are. Obviously, the people of Florida are the ones whose rights were violated, and they'll make a decision what relief they go into court to ask for. But we're going to meet with the lawyers and supporters today and try to come up with some decisions as to how to proceed.
Are you safe saying that there's a legal fight ensuing in this race?
Oh, already there's been suits filed, and I would imagine this will continue for a while, as it should. The heart of our democracy is an election and people participating in an election. And as we move forward, some will try to create an air of crisis. There is no crisis, and that would be inappropriate and unfortunate if people try to do that.
Given that statement, are you comfortable with a lot of American people thinking that the Gore campaign is crying foul right now?
Foul? Vice President Gore got more votes in this election other than Ronald Reagan than anyone who ran for president. He's winning the popular vote, and he is ahead in the Electoral College. And so people who cry foul are the ones who generally are in a situation that they are behind. The fact of the matter is, we aren't crying foul, we're crying for fairness in this situation right now. And I think that's what the people of Florida want.
Republican officials this morning say that the popular vote count is increasingly smaller in separation between Al Gore and George W. Bush, although they concede that Gore still leads Bush in that popular count. They make the case today that the absentee ballots that continue to come in, especially in California, will actually put Bush ahead of Gore eventually. Do you see that scenario happening?
No one knows. They're guessing that they know, maybe they know what absentee ballots are coming in. If they already know what the count is, I would think that that would raise a serious questions as to the appropriateness. But the fact of the matter is, you're now down to under 900 votes, I think, differing between Al Gore and George Bush, when over 6 million votes were cast in the state of Florida.
Thousands of precincts in the state, 67 different counties. Both campaigns have been trying to get people inside to supervise the recount. Are you comfortable right now with your people moving out in different parts of the state where they need to be?
Well, the recount was started in such a quick manner yesterday. It was rather difficult because we didn't finish up in Nashville to somewhere around 5:30. So to physically get people, notify them, trying to get them into the process was rather difficult. So we are moving forward. We're trying to make sure that all the areas of Florida are covered. But because of the speed in which they moved, it made it difficult.
Bill DALEY, appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Certainly the Bush campaign has their surrogates here as well. Heading up that charge, the former Secretary of State, James Baker, who now joins us live as well. also across town here in Tallahassee. Sir, good morning to you.
Good morning.
You just heard the charges from the Gore campaign about voting irregularity that may be looked into further and possibly eventually legal action. What is your reaction to those charges this morning?
Well, my reaction is that any voting jurisdiction, when ballots are properly or improperly marked, are going to throw those ballots out. When ballots show votes for more than one candidate for the same office, those votes are not going to be counted. My reaction is also that the real issue here ought to be, with respect to this recount, ought to be whether or not the voting authorities of Florida adequately and properly pursued the law of Florida in conducting this election. And that's really why we're here. We are here, the Bush campaign and the Gore campaign is here to make certain, I think, that we understand this is a legal exercise now and not a political exercise, that we conduct ourselves in an atmosphere of calm, as expeditiously as possible. Vice President Gore himself used that term yesterday, in full accordance with the law of Florida and as openly and transparently as possible. And both campaigns have the right at every stage of these proceedings to have their representatives present. So, and I haven't heard any allegations of fraud or that sort of thing. I've heard some suggestions that a ballot was confusing, a ballot that a Democratic, elected Democrat election supervisor approved, a ballot that the former which had been used in prior elections. So I think we need to back off here a little bit in terms of threatening lawsuits, filing lawsuits, and hurling charges.
Yes, sir, there is a suggestion, I apologize about the interruption, a suggestion here that the lawsuits in the southeastern part of Florida may call for a revote. At that point, is there any point at all where the Bush campaign would indeed accept that revote as a means of being fair and equitable here in the state of Florida?
I don't know that that's permitted under Florida law. I'm not a Florida lawyer, and I can't answer that question. I don't know whether that can be ordered or whether it's permitted.
Also, sir, in addition to that, there are Republican officials who are now suggesting that the popular vote is not finished just yet. Are you comfortable saying as well that George W. Bush may overtake Al Gore in the popular vote?
Sure, the popular vote hadn't been finally counted yet, and it's entirely possible that Governor Bush could end up winning the national popular vote. But regardless of who wins the popular vote, you know, we are operating under one system. That's the great thing about this country of ours. We are a nation of laws, and we respect the law that's in place. If we decide we're going to do away with the Electoral College, that's a debate for another day and another time. This election was conducted with the Electoral College mechanism in place, and we need to respect that, just like we need to respect the will of the voters of Florida in terms of their voting choice. And that's why this process ought to be very carefully conducted in strict accordance with Florida law.
We are told that up to 10 days after this election, a number of outstanding overseas ballots can be tabulated up to about the 17th of November, which would take us a week out, basically to next Friday. What are you hearing on the inside, knowing the campaigns are so closely in tune with that absentee ballot and the voting across the state, for how this race could change when those absentee ballots are indeed all tallied up here?
Well, all I know is that in the past, we've done very well with those absentee ballots. If you go back to 1996, I think we got a majority of those absentee ballots. I don't think we know this morning how many of those absentee ballots haven't been returned and might be mailed in. And again, in keeping with what I just said about respecting Florida law here, that is what Florida law provides, and we may very well indeed have to wait that period of time and take a look. But we're not really going to know answers to any of this until the basic recount that's going on now is completed. That is the count of votes that were voted here in the state, either absentee voted or voted in person.
Former Secretary of State James Baker live in Tallahassee. Sir, thank you for your time as well.
Thank you.
Again, the tally at this point, 1,278, the margin of difference. In about 35 minutes' time, the votes will continue to be tallied up here live in Tallahassee. It will be a very, very interesting day, to say the least. Back to Atlanta now. Here's more with Carol.
and Leon.
All right, good deal. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks,
We'll
Bill.
get back to you a little bit later on. But still to come this morning, an early edition, The Call, heard round the world.
How the networks jumped the gun not once, but twice.
Texas will become the 43rd